or as I prefer to call it, the transatlantic traffic in enslaved Africans. And usually when we teach that history, if there's anything you take away from it, growing up in the UK, it's that William Wilberforce set Africans free. There's nothing else you probably learned in school other than William Wilberforce set Africans free. I went to the National Portrait Gallery when I was a child, 7 years old, and my teacher pulled me aside and pointed at the picture of William Wilberforce and said, Kingsley, she was Canadian, this man, he stopped slavery. Now, unfortunately for my teacher, I went to a Pan-African Saturday school where we learned about the Maroons and the Haitian Revolution. So I'm 7, but I know a little history. So I'm like, miss, all by himself. You mean he helped? And she beefed me. She was like, no, Kingsley, he stopped slavery. I was like, come on, miss, stop it. So, for people who believe in freedom and democracy, as we say we do, who believe in human rights, we must understand that slavery is not new. Even though the transatlantic traffic in enslaved Africans may have been particularly brutal, may have gone on particularly long, may have been particularly large scale, there may have been particular features. Ancient Greece had slavery, ancient Rome had slavery, there was slavery in the Middle East, there was forced servitude in certain African empires for sure. Right? Slavery is not a new thing in human history, but only once in the whole history of humanity that I know of, and that I've ever been able to find in history, have enslaved people overthrown the government and become the government themselves. Now surely for anyone who genuinely believes in freedom and democracy and human rights, and we talk about the march toward democracy, what could be more democratic than getting rid of slavery? We want to cheer for abolitionists, but we won't cheer for enslaved people who freed themselves and became the government. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, between 1789 and 1804 in Haiti, the enslaved Africans in Haiti defeated the 3 major European empires of the time at war and declared themselves independent and the first nation to abolish slavery. I know our Prime Minister wants to keep repeating while he's visiting Jamaica that everyone in Jamaica should remember Britain's role in abolition because Britain was the first country to abolish slavery. But 1804 comes before 1807. It's just basic arithmetic. Next slide, please. Some of the leaders of the Haitian Revolution, again, one of the fascinating things about history is how sexist history is, even revolutionary history. So most of the leaders we know, even from black revolutionary history, are always men. Yet we know in the Haitian Revolution, from Toussaint Louverture's own mouth, a gentleman we're going to get to in a minute, that 30% of all the fighting troops in the Haitian Revolutionary Army were women. Given that 2/3 of the people enslaved in the Americas were men, that means women were absolutely fully playing their role in the army. This is one of the leaders, Cecile Fatiman. She was what we call a voodoo priest, and her and a man called Dutty Boukman, who was also a voodoo priest and a Muslim. He was a former Maroon in Jamaica. He left Jamaica, he came to Haiti. In 1789, they staged a ceremony that was really what we see as the formal part of the Haitian Revolution. We have to understand there were hundreds of rebellions throughout transatlantic slavery, which is normal. You try to kidnap people and their children and enslave them, they're going to rebel. It's normal. And the only way to maintain slavery was through terrorism. And we can go through whole catalogues of the kinds of terrorism that were used. But in 1789, Boukman and Fatiman started a ceremony that kicked off what would become the only successful slave revolution in human history and lead to the defeat of the 3 major empires in Europe and the breaking of the back of the transatlantic traffic forever. Next slide, please. Another leader, female leader, Santi Belair. She's famous because when she was executed, which she was, she first of all demanded to be executed by firing squad. They were going to hang her because she was a woman. She said, no, I demand to be executed by firing squad like a man. And according to the tradition, her husband, naturally, if you're about to be killed, was a bit upset and he was crying. And she apparently slapped him and said, do you not know how sweet it is to die for liberty? Stand up. And basically her husband had to stand up and take the bullets like a man. Because you know we're told only men can be brave. Be like a man, don't be like a woman. Well, Santi Belair was like a man. Of course, she was really like a woman. Next slide, please. Now, the leaders that we do know, if we know anything about the Haitian Revolution, will be the following 2 gentlemen. This gentleman is called Jean-Jacques Dessalines. He was the man who actually led the country to independence. He was the deputy general, if you like, for most of the revolution. He was underneath the main leader, Toussaint Louverture. But he was the leader who actually took Haiti across the finish line, who fought the final battle against the French, the Battle of Vertières. And he declared the country independent in 1804. After declaring the country independent, he massacred all of the French people left on the island. What a lot of pseudo-historians have done is said he killed all the white people left on the island to try and racialize the history in a way that is not totally accurate. What they don't really want to tell you is no, he killed all of the French people left on the island, with the active encouragement of Britain and America, who were not really getting on with France at the time. This is during the Napoleonic Wars. What's more, part of this history that we don't learn, fascinating part of the history, is that the Polish, who were part of the French army, defected from the French army and fought with the Africans against the French, against slavery. And when the revolution was over, he didn't kill the Polish. In fact, if you look at the Constitution of 1805, he done something that's very fascinating. He declared that the only ethnic identity valid in Haiti from this day forward would be black. And that even the Polish and the Germans who fought with us, from this day forward, they're black. which I thought was fascinating as a social scientist, for someone to say, right, being black has been a badge of dishonor, has been a crime, has been something to make you a slave for all of our history on this island. Now blackness is just going to be normal. We're even going to say that white people are black. And interestingly, of course, they renamed the island Haiti after the honor of the indigenous people, because that was their name for it. Yeah, the French had called it, well, the Spanish had called it San Domingo, and it had all various different European names. It's now Haiti and the Dominican Republic, by the way, because it's one island. But during colonial times, it was at various points, one side was Spanish, one side was French, then it was unified, then it split again. And this is the gentleman that everyone knows, if they do know about the Haitian Revolution, Toussaint Louverture. He was the leader for most of the revolution. All of these people I've just shown you began their life as enslaved human beings. Toussaint Louverture was a slave until he was 45 years old. But he became an educated enslaved person. He became a privileged slave, if you like. He was allowed to read. He was a coachman, which was usually a role that was reserved for mulattoes, mixed people, or for Europeans. So he began to read. And in the Bible, and in a book by a French scholar called Abby Reinau, he started reading all sorts of stories about rebellion, about revolution, about a Messiah. And he decided he was going to be that Messiah. And he became a brilliant military general, and he led the country for most of its history. Then in 1802, after the French had betrayed him many, many times, the French said, all right, come to France, come on, we'll settle this. Come to France, we'll have a negotiation. Many of Toussaint's advisors said, Toussaint, don't go to France. You know what they're going to do, don't go to France. But I think maybe Toussaint was tired at this point. Maybe he thought the French was going to negotiate, as they said they were going to. I don't know what he thought. But he went to France, the French put him in prison and starved him to death, because they intended to reinstall slavery, even though they said they hadn't. Fortunately for history, the French lost the final battle and slavery was outlawed in Haiti. But, unfortunately, in 1825, once the different European warring powers had made up, the French threatened to re-invade Haiti. And they said, if you don't pay us back for our loss of earnings, for our loss of property, 91 million gold francs, we're going to go to war with you again. At that point, maybe Haiti wasn't in a position to go to war again. They paid back those 91 million gold francs, and it took over a century to do so. So when we talk about slavery being ancient history, well, if they started paying in 1825, I do believe it was 1947 when they finished paying that debt. Next slide, please. But one of the things that the Haitian Revolution did lead to was the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon, for those who don't know what that was, that green area was French Louisiana. That area of America was owned by the French until 1803. Napoleon had dreams of a new empire based on Haiti. Haiti at the time was the most profitable colony in the world, producing more sugar than India, producing half of all Europe's coffee. It was an incredibly profitable colony. Once Napoleon lost that colony, he had no purpose for this anymore, so he sold it to what became America. So the Haitian Revolution, and a revolution on a tiny little island of enormous hemispheric importance, of enormous human importance, yet we don't learn about it. We've got to make up our mind. We're either for freedom and democracy, and we're going to celebrate movements for that, or we're not. We can't cheer for abolitionists, because their efforts would have been worthless, with the greatest of respect to them, without the revolutions that were going on in the Caribbean, and we can demonstrate that. 1804, Haitian Revolution ends. Oh, magically, 1807, Britain has an epiphany and says slavery is bad, and outlaws the transatlantic traffic. Finally, slavery itself was made illegal in Britain in 1834, or in Britain's Caribbean colonies, 2.5 years after the largest rebellion in Jamaican history. Well, what do you know? Isn't that a coincidence that the dates are always so close? 60,000 enslaved Africans in Jamaica under a man called Sam Sharp burnt down half the plantations in Jamaica, killed a whole bunch of slave masters. 500 of them were hung in revenge, but nonetheless, slavery, the back of slavery in Jamaica, in Haiti and elsewhere had been broken. There was no use for it even anymore. And of course, it wasn't central in many ways to Britain and other more industrialized countries' economies at that point. But again, that's another debate for another day. That's not to say there were not genuine abolitionists in this country, and they shouldn't be remembered. They absolutely should. But to remember abolitionists without remembering hundreds of thousands of people who physically shed their blood to free themselves seems a little bit hypocritical to me. Next slide, please.